Welcome to the Infant Well Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. And today we are excited because we have the one and only Barry James Dyke. If you guys have been listening to us for any time whatsoever, I've referenced many of his books. Anthony has referenced many. But today we're excited because we're going to bring Barry back and dive into some very relevant and current events financially. So, Barry, welcome back today.
Well, thanks for having me, Anthony and Cameron. It's always good to see you, and greetings and best wishes for both of you guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Barry, I've got a question. We've got a bunch of questions for you today, but you know what? I've got two of the three books. Your other book, the first one, is actually sitting at home on my nightstand. I left it, but I've got Pirates of Manhattan 2, Highway to Serfdom, and then also Guaranteed Income.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to start with was, where does your ability for kind of this research come from? Did you always have this kind of innate sense of digging, or did this just come about one day? How did this get started for you?
Well, when I was a kid, I used to, my parents would give me toys and things like that, and I would take them apart. I want to figure out how these things work. I was kind of, I just want it mechanically. I just, I would, I have these like robots and things like that, and I couldn't figure out how they work. But I learned a lot when I took things apart. I could figure out how they could work. Now I would try to put them back together. Now they didn't always work when I put them back together, but I learned a lot by things taking them apart. How does it really work? And so what came to financial products, I kind of had the same curiosity, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I said, how does a mutual fund work, or how does a life insurance policy work, or how's annuity, or how does a derivative work? So, and I knew a lot of people were really getting hosed, and I knew this intuitively, but people were getting hosed or taken advantage of, and they still are today. And it's just on a grand scale. It's just incomprehensible. So I wanted to figure out how some of these things work. And so it wasn't until I figured out how the banking system works until I could really break it apart and then put it back together. Then I can understand how these other financial products work, mutual funds, which are stuff within 401ks and so forth. So it was a long process. I had to read it from a lot of different sources, but, I just kept at it. And I hated bullies, because I don't know about you guys, but I always hated bullies in school or high school, whatever it is. And I look at these guys at Wall Street who are pulling all the levers right now as bullies. So I said, how do these guys really do this stuff? So, but because it's so important within a society where people save money. I mean, you got to save before you invest, but now everything's just got to invest. And right now, there's actually, I hate to say it, guys, you're in Vegas, but everything's being shoved into the Wall Street casino.
Yeah.
And so I said, there's got to be a better way. And then God blessed me. But I was also, God gave me a good intuitive knowledge of math. So I had done a lot of, I owned, a pension consulting business. I still do pensions today. And then I had done corporate benefits for, even some, Fortune 50, 100 companies. So I had a pretty good grasp of math, but it really wasn't until I understood how the banking system really worked until I could be of service to others. And then, I went through a hard time going all this research, and then I was blessed to get to know Nelson Nash and found the infinite banking concept, and then Bob Castellone, who's still around today, and other people. And so that's kind of a roundabout way. But what I'm saying is that this has happened about 20 years ago when I talked to a CEO of a life company, and he told me how they couldn't create money out of thin air like banks do. I said, "Oh my God, everyone needs to know this." But it's still true today. But it's been a challenge getting the truth out there.
So, Barry, I'm curious. You'd mentioned that early on, before you started doing the research, you felt like something was off, like something that wasn't a fair game. I'm curious what led you to come to that conclusion before you did your research.
Well, I knew it, I knew it was intuitive. Like I had, I was always a self-starter, and I had all these pension plans. I actually, in the 1980s, believe it or not, I actually had a little pension business where I ran with it. And And then there was so much red tape with these things. I said, oh my goodness. And I was working really hard. I was working 80, 90 hours a week trying to maintain all this stuff. And I intuitively knew that it wasn't that profitable for me to run them. And I also knew the client was their money was being put at risk. Then I also understood that if a person had a lot of wealth, that a retirement plan, back in the day, guys, I hate to say it, 20 years ago, retirement plan, Anthony, I don't know how long you've been you were in the CPA, but if you remember back in the day, retirement plans could be taxed as high as 90, 95%.
I'm not quite that old, Barry, but I appreciate it. But you're right. That's a good point. Taxes have been over 90%. And I think a lot of people do not realize that.
Yeah. So there's actually people don't realize it, but all those listeners out there today, there was actually a tax of anything over in excess of $750,000 in a qualified plan. They call it a success tax. So a person, and then unified credit at the time was only like about $1 million, $1.2 million or something like that. So if a person had a lot of wealth, the money in a retirement plan could be, for a really successful person, could be taxed at 90%. Now for everybody, but this was true. So, and then I was blessed to get to know Bob Castellone and Nelson Nash, and then I realized that the money within a retirement plan, like a 401k, is kind of like playing pinball with your hands tied behind your back, where Wall Street had all the levers. So I said, well, there's got to be a better way. It's got to be, something which is going to be more helpful to people. And then that's how I knew from a mathematical perspective that life insurance and annuities were the only thing that really, really worked, and still true today. And then I knew and then from a moral perspective, I realized that all these people's savings was funding this whole Wall Street casino, which is still happening today. So that said, so I just want to have people have seatbelts around their money and guardrails around their money, and I found that really no one was really telling people. So that's how it all started.
Speaking of no one telling anybody, I still remember when I read Pirates of Manhattan, your first book. I was absolutely blown away just by the amount of information in there, but just the message in there that was completely contrary to everything else that was being told out there. And really, right, my takeaway when I was a young man was, looks like we got some audio, but my takeaway when I was a young man was, man, everybody's out there telling you kind of one thing, but banks and financial institutions are telling you one thing, but doing the exact opposite with their own money. How did you, right, how did you realize that? How did you dig this information up and come across this information?
Well, what it was at the time, I was always kind of a entrepreneurial guy. I mean, when I was like in my 20s, believe it or not, I owned part of a high-tech company, and that ended up being a disaster. Okay. But, so I've been successful, but I've failed more times than you want to know, guys, but I just intuitively knew there had to be a better way. And then at the time when I was first researching the first book, okay, which took me a number of years, I had to figure out the banking system. And then when I figured out how very, very fragile it is, I said, why doesn't people understand why a life insurance policy or a whole life policy is really solid, or annuity was? And then, God, I think God, I mean, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer. Okay. So then God has a funny way of working, but then, and the funny thing is, I talked to some of these companies who were actually doing this stuff in a big way. No one would talk to me. But then there was a black woman, whatever, down the FDIC, and she would, and I would send her flowers and candy, whatever. She hasn't been around there for years, and she helped me start digging. I said, oh my goodness, all this stuff is right here in the bloody open. And no one really know about it. And actually it's still true to this day. So I carry the torch, it's just, and it will help, it helps people, and, I don't know how many claims you guys have had, but I've had quite a few life claims over my period. And I think really, if you're in the financial service business, it's an honor and privilege to serve people. So I think you really got to know what's going on. And I'm not, I'm a capitalist. Believe me, I believe the best thing. This is still a great country. I still think, being a small business person like you guys are doing is really the best thing you can do. But they're just being lied to, and so much of it, there's so much bullshit that people really need to know what's going on.
Barry, you had talked about how weak the banks are. Do you mind expanding on why that is?
Well, no, because they're highly leveraged. Okay, so I don't know if you know about this, guys, but so if people who are listening out there Googled fractional reserve lending, take my word for it. Okay, do your own research. Okay, but if you understand how banks work, for every dollar deposit you have on deposit, they can actually create money out of thin air. So legally, prior to September 2019, guys, legally any bank in the country could lend out their money for every dollar on deposit, or say they had $10,000 in deposit, the bank could create $90,000 out of thin air. This is, and so don't believe me, do your own research, okay? But so that's what they've been essentially conformed to do. But if you look at during the financial crisis, and actually, it was Cameron, you said the Pirates of Manhattan 2 you had there, a copy there?
I do, yeah.
That book there. So I actually started looking at the actual reserve, how much banks were leveraged during 2008 crisis, and it all kind of started coming about. And I found that some banks, well, all the banks like Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, all these banks and Goldman Sachs, they're all levered 30, 40 to 1. So I knew legally they could do 1 to 9, but they were actually doing 30, 40. And this is what caused the collapse of Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers. Okay. So, some of the ones got bailed out, and I'm not going to get into politics of that, but some banks got bailed out. Goldman, Morgan Stanley got bailed out. Allied Financial, which is the old GMAC mortgage, they all got bailed out because they were the leverage of the heavens. So anyone who knows that leverage, it can be a good thing, but when you're highly leveraged, it makes anything very unstable. Does that make sense, guys?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, so we intuitively know that. So legally, banks can do this, 1 to 9 prior to 2019. They were doing a lot worse than that in 2008. I got the records from the Office of Comptroller General and all that stuff, so it's not making any of this stuff up. And actually, but since September of 2019, the banks can now lend unlimited amounts of money on the deposits, which is spooky. But I can send you the link to that. It's actually part of the Federal Reserve Comments, and it's effective, I think, March 15th of 2020. So there's no reserve requirements whatsoever.
If you could send that link, we would love to put that in the show notes, Barry.
Yeah, I'll be happy to.
Yeah, I'll read it and probably start crying, but I'd love to.
So the whole thing is that banks could create money out of thin air. There's no reserves required, and it's a club, and we're not in it. So it's just, but anyway. So I think people really need to know what's going on, because I think most people in this country are great people, but they really need to have something which is more stable, and has more integrity than what they're getting from their 401ks. And how did you figure this out, Anthony, and about the 401ks?
Oh, I tell you, I figured about the 401ks when I saw people trying to turn it into cash flow in retirement. And first of all, they're in a much higher tax bracket than they had anticipated. But then also the amount of income that they could safely take out was not sufficient to pay their bills. Yeah,
matter of fact, who was the guy who came with the 4% rule? Matter of fact, even it's in the next book. Anyhow, the guy who actually came with the 4% rule said this doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, but this has been the holy grail of all these giant mutual fund companies. He said it doesn't work, and so the reason why I'm doing this book, guys, is because what I've discovered is that these giant companies like IBM or Hewlett Packard or Bristol Myers Squibb or Rolls Royce or BMW or General Motors, they're all buying annuities from life insurance companies.
I like the direction that you're going, but I do have two kind of follow-up questions. For one, you'd mentioned the 4% rule, just in case our listeners aren't familiar, would you mind explaining what the 4% rule is?
Well, let's say we had a lump sum of money, guys, or $1 million or $500,000. Doesn't really matter. The assumption was that you could take out 4% of your principal or interest or in dividends, okay, and keep your money somewhat remain buoyant, and take out 4% over your life. So there was actually a pretty good intellectual argument that you could live off all the money and then pass it on to your heirs, which it sounds great for everybody. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that when you have a loss like last year, was it 22%, 19%? The NASDAQ was off 35%. So the thing is that in these volatile times, and then with the manipulation of interest rates, this whole 4% is really kind of silly. It doesn't really in very volatile times. So it's not very, very secure. Intellectually, it sounds great. Marketing, it sounds even better. If you're selling mutual funds and asset management fees, it sounds even better. But guess what? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So when you look at a pension retirement plan, which is really an income stream for life, you need something which is more. You need something which is more structurally sound. Okay, it's like you don't build a skyscraper without the best structural steel, and so like. But the same thing as a retirement plan or a financial future. So you see something you need something much, much stronger than what we're seeing today in the media. Okay, it's because a lot of this stuff just breaks. I mean, look at the facts of the matter are and I got this documented. Okay, the largest asset manager in the world, which is BlackRock. Okay, they had 10 trillion under management in the beginning of 2022. Now, and you know how much they lost in 2022?
How much?
1.7 trillion. So the whole thing is when it comes to retirement plan, people really, when it comes to retirement plan, I don't know. So people want to have they want to have peace of mind. They want to have income streams so they can go see their kids, or their grandkids, or whatever. And purpose of retirement plan is really to produce retirement income. It's not to gamble and speculate, but this is the way, it pretty much works in America. And another thing which influenced me too. Do you know where America stands in the top 20 in terms of retirement plan preparedness for industrialized countries? And where do you think the U.S. stands in the top 20?
20.
I do know because I was doing some prep and I had heard the answer, but surprisingly, Cameron's wrong. But
yeah, we're 19. So the whole thing is.
I don't mean, but let's just take that a second, right? America, the wealthiest country. Yeah. I mean, but still, we have a problem with retirement.
Oh, it's awful. We're horrible. I mean, we're next to Uruguay. I mean, so I'm not making that. This is Mercer. The Mercer each year. Mercer actuaries out of Australia. Okay, they do it. They do, and one of the sad things in terms of financial integrity, guys, we were the worst in terms of financial integrity. So that's when you start. This is why I'm pulling together this another book. I really didn't want to do it, but yeah, I love this country. What I'm saying, but in terms of retirement, you must be better off living in Norway or Amsterdam or Israel or these other countries. They're much better. They're much better off. And I think so. But because the problem is Wall Street is really taking over the savings of people. And so I'm saying if you insulate yourself by using proper insurance products, and believe me, I'm a registered investment advisor, so we do invest money for people, okay? But I'm saying if you look at retirement income or safe stuff, you should really be prudent with that. And So, but anyway, so yeah, we're awful.
We are awful. We've been awful, but one of the things that kind of came to mind as we're talking is we're talking about banks and how you kind of learned how they operate, and we're talking about their extreme position in leveraging.
Yeah.
Right. But I think there's also some things that they do that we could take away and maybe implement on a smaller personal level.
Yeah.
And one of the things that comes to mind is like BOLI, right? Is bank-owned life insurance, right? So, if we look at the way they operate on one end, it's like, man, do not do that. Great example not to do. On the other end is like, that's a pretty good idea. Why are they doing it? And so, Barry, if you could maybe just touch on BOLI just for a second and educate our listeners on what it is and then how the banks are using it for their reserves.
Yeah, well, that was kind of the whole. This is like the aha moment, like the God moment. This happened 15, 16 years ago, where I discovered that that banks actually, and this is still true to this day. It's still, I testify in front of Congress, and actually, some of my research has actually seeped into some banking investigations lately, but who knows where it's going to go. But what I discovered is that banks who control everything, are some of the biggest purchasers of guaranteed products in the world. So, so you're in Vegas, so, obviously the big banks are there, but if you look at today, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, you name it, all the major banks purchase life insurance as essentially as a financial instrument and as an economic tool. It's an economic power tool. And it's actually, if you read the first book, it is blessed by the Federal Reserve to have, be one of the safest instruments you can borrow, or you can buy rather. So but anyhow, I discovered this, and then all the benefits to the people. So make a long story short, a lot of banks own more money. Everyone thinks of a bank being a lot of buildings and computers, stuff like that. A lot of the banks, like Bank of New York Mellon, has which is a wealth management bank, has a huge position in life insurance, and they're using this really for the balance sheet and for the guarantees and the death benefit that comes into the bank and so on. So yeah, so the truth of the matter is that the banks, although they're really horrible at selling it, they actually, for their own account, they buy it all the time. And, that's still true to this day. And what has happened, though, guys, is that you used to be able to pull these call reports down. Now it's getting much more difficult to get to the truth, but it's still happening today. So I'm verifying this in the next book, but yeah, it's still true, but it's getting a lot harder to figure this out.
Now, Barry, I don't know if I heard this from one of your many books or listened to you on a podcast, but you had mentioned, or you did some research on where the Federal Reserve or the chairman and people that are the individuals actively in the Federal Reserve, what are they doing for retirement?
Well, that was the whole thing. This is the funny thing is that, we know that, 401k, I always tell people 401k stuff with mutual, I always tell people a toaster from Walmart has more guarantees than a 401k, So which is true. So the whole thing is so many moving parts. And so a 401k really guarantees nothing. They can put it through legalese, disclosure and arbitration, the whole thing. But the full fact of the matter is that 401k with mutual funds or ETFs, for that matter, it has no guarantees. But you're getting back to the Fed, though, is that this is what I discovered. And this is how I get into my foot in the door of Bloomberg, which I never, but I discovered the Bloomberg because I had the audit that the Federal Reserve 401k plan had 75% of its assets. It's 401k. This is all verifiable. I got the Deloitte audit. You have, Cameron, you had the book there, right?
I do.
Yeah. Well, so that's the audit's in the back of the book there. No, the other one, the guaranteed income. Yeah. So it's in there. So it's in that book. People go to barrydavis.com. So I verified, and this is how I get to speak to Bloomberg by the way, I said, by the way, guys, 75% of the Federal Reserve, which is the largest central bank in the world, which also has more economists, more PhD economists, roughly 400 highly paid economists under one roof, were 70, and they had 75% of their money in fixed annuities in their retirement plan. So this is kind of the craziness of it all, and this is how a lot of corporate deferred comp plans work. They're actually guaranteed annuities. They may be backed by the balance sheet, but they work as an annuity.
So, Barry, what I'm hearing is if we look at people who probably are the best or understand money, or the best are going to be banks and the Federal Reserves and these economists.
Yeah.
But both of them have a high amount of their assets in cash value life insurance.
Cash value life insurance and conservative strategies, guys, too. Not just in cash value. I mean, because they can't put it all. It'd be stupid for them to put it all in, and they don't do that. But they're very conservative in their strategies. And this is why I had to revise the book. So I actually went to the Federal Reserve, how they structure like their pension plans and things like that. They're all guaranteed annuities, which is a life insurance is an annuity through via 1035 exchange. So, but yeah, that's what you find is that, and then a pension is an annuity, and so what you find is that they're all taking these very conservative approaches. Now they'll gamble with your money, but for their own money they don't. No. Yeah. So I'll give you a great example. Morgan Stanley, which is, they make 70% of their income from gambling with other people's money. You know how much they have in their own retirement plan in their pension plan in stocks and derivatives and junk bonds?
Very little.
80-20 probably, right? Isn't that one of the rules that they say, 80-20?
Would you say, Cameron?
5%.
I would say 80%, because that's what they tell us to do with our money.
0.
They have 99% of their defined benefit plan. And this is, again, I got this from public records, from the summary plan description. They have 99% of their money into high quality fixed income. They don't even have any money in junk bonds. Wow. So this is the whole thing. So this is what you're seeing, and it's not just other institutions to do it. This is why I have to do the book. So Merrill Lynch, has annuities, and there are all these other institutions have them all the time, and actually the banks buy all this stuff too. So it's do as I say, not as I do. We'll get gamble with your money, but for us, we don't want any risk.
Now, Barry, I've been following you for a while, and there was a while where you were mentioning how you were going to be in a part of a documentary, and I was anticipating for it to come out, but I never saw it.
Well, you go to the link boomermovie.com. Okay, and actually it was I was actually about 2 years ago, a guy by the name of Dyke came out with this movie called The Baby Boom Dilemma. And I'm very grateful. I only have a cameo part. It was kind of erased because of editing. That's another, which I think I told you guys previous to the show why. But some friends of mine are in it. Dave Walker, who was the former Comptroller General. Ted Siddell, who's one of the top whistleblowers in the country. Ted Bennett, the guy who actually created the 401k. I got him. I got a lot of these people in the movie, but I kind of got edited out because because of the stuff I was revealing, which the media wouldn't talk about. So I'm in it. Go to boomermovie.com. But I'm in it with let's see, some of the top economists in the country. Moshe Mobilsky from Canada. Let's see, and William Sharp, who got the Nobel Prize in economics, and a whole bunch of other folks. But anyway, so I'm in it with about some of the top economists, retirement economists in the country.
What were you saying that they didn't want to include in the documentary?
Well, the filmmaker, and I was edited out because I presented all this information to Bloomberg roughly about 10 years ago. This is where the Federal Reserve puts their money. This is where the banks put their money. And And I essentially said, I gave it all to Bloomberg, and they refused to publish it. So they didn't want to. But anyway, so that's one of the reasons why I'm doing another book.
Barry, one of the questions I had written down here was, no good deed goes unpunished, right? Like, how come you haven't been canceled yet, right? Have you experienced pushback in addition to kind of what you just shared with us? Is right?
Yeah. They don't. Yeah, it's just that's why God's so important in my life. I have been even on YouTube and things like that. I was doing YouTubes a lot. I used to have a radio show, and I would get downloads from all around the country and all around the world. And with YouTube, I was essentially getting neutered, and so I kind of, I wasn't too enthusiastic. But yeah, so it's all true. And but hey, I look at my father was like a Marine in World War II, and with these folks, sacrifice for the country, and what these other folks did, and then we also have a division where we have a company called the Prosperous Pilot. We do this financial planning just for pilots. I like pilots because they're smart and they're good savers and all that stuff. But
yeah.
So a lot of the guys are in the military. They were in the Marines or Air Force, whatever. And these guys are just, some of the stuff these guys are doing a lot braver than me. So, anyway, so yeah, there has been the pushback, yes.
Barry, one of the questions I had is kind of talking about your new. Well, actually, you know what? I've got another one written down here. It's about Dave Ramsey, right? Is you are now talking about, right? Hey, mutual funds, 401ks are kind of the worst place that you can put money. But man, he's been one of the most popular talking gurus out there for a while now. How does someone that has listened to kind of Dave Ramsey for years and then hear you and kind of your presentation, how does someone kind of reconcile that?
Well, I listen. First of all, let's just see what he's doing right. He talks about debt. Okay, so which I'm all the new slavery guys is debt. This is how they enslave people. Okay, so and he's been enslaved in debt, and I've actually been passionate because I've been in the same kind of position he was in. So I'm very passionate about it too. So I agree with the stuff he's saying about debt is great. But the thing is, he's running a publishing business, and he has his ELPs, endorsed local providers and things like that. So he makes his money off of leads and stuff. And he has if people watch it, Google Dave Ramsey's house in Tennessee, wherever the heck it is. Okay. He's made, it has like a 15,000 square foot home. But the whole thing is that, a lot of this stuff is, it's soft dollars. People have, the whole agenda is being pushed back. But luckily, because I've written the books, guys, I've spoken to a lot of people. Like I became friends with Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, before he died, and he really encouraged me to keep working on the retirement problem because he thinks it's one of the biggest problems. So and then Ted Bennett, the guy who created the 401k, says, Barry says, I don't know what you're doing. He says, but keep doing it. And then you meet guys like Nelson Nash who said, you got to keep doing it, or you got other people, and then even because they just don't know what's going on. So, and then, every once or twice a week, whatever, I'll get an email from someone saying, just keep doing what you're doing. But anyway, so I'm not, and I'm believing the market, but a lot of the stuff, it's bullshit. And the whole thing is that if you look at the actual rates of return, and I have two actuarial firms that back me up on this. One of them, Clisswater, which shows you it's out of Newport Beach, California, and they have an office in Manhattan. Another one, Piscataqua Research, was near here. If you look at the long-term rates of return in the market over a 20-year period of time, it's really everything. Well, Anthony, you're a accountant numbers guy. Everything returns to the mean. So generally, over the long haul, everyone's kind of ends up being average. So when you look at really long rates of return over a long extended period of time, everything gets an average rate of return. Actually, they almost duplicated a 30-year Treasury bill. Okay, so all this stuff, so all these pension plans, like CalPERS or whatever, they're thinking to get all these auto rates of return, and they don't. And this is like Cliffwater. They did the research on $4 trillion, and so the whole thing is people. Now you do have outliers in there. There's always going to be people who are going to make money in the market, these big hot shots. But generally, for the most part, we're most average, okay. And people really don't make money over extended periods of time. I'm not saying I'm against it, because there is a lot of so much to be gained by equities. But I'm saying when it comes to retirement planning, you want to have something which is more secure. And this is what these people are getting with these government pension plans, by the way. They're getting annuities. So the risk really isn't on them. It's on you and I as taxpayers, because we're funding these things.
Yeah. One of the fundamental problems with kind of the retirement situation that we're in, I think, starts with savings. And as I was researching this, one of the stats that I came across was in 2020, there was $4 trillion in circulation. By 2021, there was 10 trillion, and by November of 2022, there was $20 trillion in circulation. I don't think people kind of understand the extent to which the U.S. is printing money and at such an alarming rate. Barry, what happens to an economy when so much money is printed in such a short period of time, and what can people do to preserve the value of their dollar?
As you know, Cameron, inflation, it's the stealth tax. It just kills us, and that's why, I was with my daughter last night. I had a wonderful meal with my daughter last night. We got 2 ice cream cones. It was 16 or 17 bucks. I'm like, holy moly, 16, 17 bucks for 2 ice cream cones. And, so this is what you have. And when you have this money printing, the people who really benefit from the money printing, guys, as you know, it's the institutions who have the first dibs on it, if you will, the banks, because they can multiply it, or the government contractors who, create, so we can find another bomb for Ukraine. It's like, so those people really benefit. So the thing is that the printing of money, while it kills the purchasing power of people's money, and it creates massive inflation in assets. So you're in Vegas, but like I'm here in New England, the seacoast of New England, which is a beautiful area. But an average home around here is like, average price for a home now is $905,000, which is stupid.
But I'm sure they have low property tax and low state income tax, right?
Well, there's no income tax, but the property tax is very high. Because, but again, if you have a high property tax, but 80% of that goes to fund the pension benefits, the salary of the public employees. So what you have is the massive inflation. So when you have all this massive printing of money, the people who have the assets, and what is it, 90% of the market, 90% of the stock market is owned by the top 10%, something like that. So the people who really benefit from the appreciation of the stock market and the real estate are really the very wealthy. So you have, unfortunately, when in these situations too, you also have a huge problem in economic inequality. And to me, that's what drives me, is that it's like we've never seen this before. And so I think this whole global warming stuff, which is a problem, whatever, but I hate pollution as much as anybody. But the real problem is economic inequality. This is my opinion, more so than anything. So, but by this massive printing of the money, it builds the government, it makes the rich much, much richer, but it kills the regular old people.
Barry, there's those statistics, if I'm honest, are a little depressing, right? Like that seems overwhelming and where people are at with inflation. But at the end of your second book, you give, I think it's 12 items, right? To kind of things that you can do, 12 steps that somebody can do. And 2 of them that I remember, number 1 was invest in yourself. The second one that I remember was number 7 was stay out of debt and build your reserves. And then the third one that I remember was number 12 was become self-reliant.
Yeah.
Would you mind touching maybe on 1 or 2 of those and just give some people a little bit of hope here?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of it. I've said this on national radio, whatever, the most important thing in my life is God. So, and I don't care who I say that to, but anyway, but, to be self-reliant. And I think, I call it the 5 Fs. Okay, this is kind of silly, but I may put it in the next book. But I call it the 5 Fs. The first most important thing in my life is my faith. The second thing is family. Okay, and my kids and even my ex, whatever. I really care for them. Friends, no one does this stuff on their own. Okay, I couldn't get the word out with you guys. I consider friends. Fourthly, I consider physical fitness. I'm not a young guy anymore, but I still work out and exercise good amount, and that keeps you really going. And then the last thing is finance. Okay, but I think there's the most important 5 Fs. But if I had to choose, I always take faith, the family and friends, and fitness, and then finance. But yeah, being more staying out of debt, because this is how they enslave you. And like, look at this whole student loan thing. This is going to be an albatross of just I can't comprehend it, because the student loans have been in abeyance since forbearance, if you will, the past 3 years during COVID. Now I think, Anthony, you're their CPA. When they restart? I think October 1st, people have to start paying back the student loans again.
I don't even know. They keep on pushing it back, but
yeah, it will start. So the whole thing is all these academia, which is unfortunately, So in other words, also being by more self-reliant, Cameron. I think don't take my word from this stuff. Do read stuff, okay? Don't a lot of stuff is on the internet. You can get a lot of good information, but a lot of the academic stuff it's an indoctrination system. It's not an education system. So so people don't take my word for it. Research some of this stuff.
Awesome, Barry. Thanks for that. I do want to hear. I want to take some time here and devote to your next book. Right? What's the title? What are you tackling? I know you referenced a few times during this interview, and I think before we started recording that you said it was going to be 700-800 pages.
Yeah. Well, what it is it's and probably it's probably going to be about like 350 pages. Okay, really kind of like meat, like narrative, if you will. Yeah. And then there's going to be like 300-400 pages of backup, because so a lot of the stuff which there's been a lot of craziness, guys, that we've seen. I don't know. We've had a speculation origin, unforeseen demand. Just for instance, things like cryptocurrencies. I really didn't, guys, I really didn't want to tackle this stuff, but it was happening. So I said, you really have to study history, and what does the old saying go? It was those who not learn from history, it's bound to repeat itself, whatever. So, and Mark Twain said, history may not repeat itself, but it sure rhymes. So we're seeing a speculation mania, which has been not unlike the South Sea bubble in the United Kingdom and with the 1700s, and then the tulip mania where people we had it with cryptocurrencies, okay? And everyone was in the bandwagon. So, but the bankruptcies are just, so I had all these the facts and figures on the bankruptcies. So all these companies are going bankrupt. And dealing in some of all the institutions, all the banks, the mutual fund companies, Fidelity was the biggest into this crap. So I just documenting all the bankruptcies, and the thing is that they can't erase all the bankruptcies. So again, things like cryptocurrencies, or why am I bringing this up? Because these are the things that work against people. I'm not against crypto. Eventually, unfortunately, this is going to be some type of a digital currency. It looks inevitable, guys. But so there's another thing which was the SPACs, which is the special purpose acquisition companies. Which so there's been tons of them. I don't know if you're like these electric car companies like Lucid Motors and Nikola and all these things. They're all going bankrupt, and it's all being funded with other people's money. So I had to list that stuff, and then the actual in private equity, which is now the part of the 401k as of June of 2020 for people's retirement plans, which is really kind of tragic. So now they can make, as if the 401k was not complicated enough, they're making it more complicated, and they're kowtowing to Wall Street once again and stuffing into people's retirement plans. So I knew how many bankruptcies there have been over the past 20, 30 years in this stuff. So I actually listed them. So it's just, but there's been actually, I don't know, 500, 600, 700 bankruptcies in private equity. And due to private equity, and you guys are in Vegas, and we were talking about how Caesars Entertainment went bankrupt, or Stations Casino, which is now known as Red Rocks, how they went bankrupt with private equity ownership. So, and they're all interconnected. So, and then not only that, when you had the Stations Casino, there was which is connected to a company called Colony Capital. And the weird thing about it, but you couldn't make this stuff up, guys. It was also connected to the guy by the name of Tom Barak, who was on the board of directors of First Republic Bank, the largest bank that collapsed. It was actually connected to Stations Casino, believe it or not. So, so a lot of these things are interconnected. So I wanted to make it really. So you can't, they're erasing a lot of stuff on the internet now, but you can't erase all this stuff. So it's very interconnected to all this stuff. So what you guys are doing, I salute you, because you're just really trying to make things safer for everybody out there.
Barry, beforehand, you mentioned you mentioned private equity. Can you give us an example of what private equity is? Maybe grab Red Rock or Caesars and give us an example of that type of transaction.
Well, okay, great. Let's say Caesar. Everyone knows Caesar Entertainment is the largest, I think, gambling casino in the world, and it was formerly known as Harris. And when so when you have private equity, what they do is they take a teeny little bit of their money, and they get most of their money from like a public pension plan, like a Nevada or California. Actually, CalPERS was involved in this deal, or the Texas Teachers Retirement System. And they go out and they do a leverage buyout of a company using mostly debt. It's other people's money. So they get the seed capital, if you will, or limited partner capital from the institutional money, i.e. public pension plans. And most of the, like a company, or 80% of it is really funded with debt. Okay. It's the old leverage buyout, corporate rates we saw in the 1980s. But what private equity and Wall Street does, they just repackage everything, make it sound really nice. But it's all leverage buyouts. Nothing's really changed. So when this happened so when they bought Caesars Entertainment, it was one of the largest leverage buyouts of all time, like for $28 billion. I mean, this is a big one, guys.
Dang.
28 with a B. And so, but I think there was two private equity firms, Apollo Global Management and Texas Pacific Group, were two, Ivy League private equity firms, okay, who did a leverage buyout of the company. And they were paying, you know how much they were paying in interest before they went bankrupt at Caesars Entertainment? Any guesses? They were paying $2.1 billion a year just in interest expense.
Dang.
So the whole thing, anytime you put this amount of debt on, you put this type of debt on a family or a small business or any enterprise, you can put a lot of strain on it. Okay. But the way these guys set them up, they're actually not the private equity funds themselves that owns it. It's actually their fund. So you really can't attach the private equity firm. So you have just a major bankruptcy, and people don't understand how the mechanics work. So I said, people. So I had to understand it, so people can understand it. So, but in any event, so they're sticking this kind of methodology into your 401k, and people don't even understand it, but they are.
And when this whole when everything busted with Caesars, one thing that it affected was the pension plan that they had for their employees. Because I had some of Cameron, I don't know if you know this, but I had a CPA firm a while back, and I had some executives from Caesars, and then I had some retirees, and they had retired and had a promise that they were going to receive this amount of money per month. And then when that whole thing settled, I don't remember how it settled, but there was some talk that her pension was going to be cut in half. And I think they went back and tried to fix it, but it just shows it's even affecting the people that had served there and left with the promise of a pension, and they were also paying the price.
Yeah, well, that's actually a fact. And what is it? Caesars had a deferred comp, which is essentially a side agreement. Any pension plans, they're protected under the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. It was so they'd be protecting the PBGC. But I know for a fact there was because Caesars, they had 68,000 employees, a big company, huge company. But they had an executive selected, so you may have had some of these people. They had a selective benefit plan, which, believe it or not, irony, was generally financed with life insurance and annuities. But because they're side agreements, they got torched during the season. So people had this separate deferred compensation agreements with Caesars they lost. Now, but the guy who ran the Caesars, Gary Loveman. There we go. I remember Gary Loveman. Okay. Before Caesars went into bankruptcy in 2014, he made $32 million.
That sounds about right.
So he made $32 million, and I believe, I believe, believe it or not, even though the private equity firms the company ended up going into bankruptcy, and it's an incredible tale. I think they still made money. Josh Kosman, who's is a great reporter, people out there. And by the way, he wrote a great book called The Buyout of America. New York Post attorney, just a great guy. Even though everyone lost money, billions on the collapse of Caesars, they still made money. So, but this was going on, and the same thing with Stations Casino, which was which is in your backyard.
Yeah. Barry, you mentioned Josh Kosman's Buyout of America. Who else do you follow? Who do you listen to for current events or information? Besides
Infinite Wealth Podcast, what else is on your playlist there, Barry?
There was actually there's some great people out there, brave people out there who've done a lot of great research, and they've been inspirational to me. Actually, Eileen Applebaum, who's a researcher for the Center Research, she's a great gal. And this is kind of weird, is that let me see if I can get one here. I'll give her a plug. Hang on. But one of the people who gave me, I learned a lot from, was Gretchen Morgensen. She just came with the book, These Are the Plunderers. And she said she kind of lifted the title from my first book, because they said system. So, but anyway, she wrote this book on private equity. Gretchen Morgensen, Pulitzer Prize winning network. Pulitzer Prize, and this is on private equity. What I'm talking about. I go into a lot more research in depth than she does, but she was very influential. There's a lot of good people out there. Ludovic, a fellow who he's a economist with Oxford. He's been there's a lot of really good people there. There's actually a very good blog, PEUreport.org. It's a very good. I don't know who the guy is behind it, but it's very good research. So these are really, so a lot of the truth is out there. But the thing is that, as Bob Dylan says, money doesn't talk, it swears. And that's unfortunately how it's happening with people's savings and retirement plans.
Speaking of swearing, do you follow Gerald Celente, I think?
Gerald's a friend of mine.
Is he?
Yeah.
Maybe that's where I started following him, was maybe you recommended him last time, but man, I love that guy's insight, and he doesn't hold back.
Yeah, I know Gerald. He's a force of nature, but he's up there in was it Kingston, New York, or whatever, and he's just a wonderful guy. And they don't like it. They don't like truth tellers, but no, Gerald's. I'm friends with Gerald, and so the good thing is that when you write these books is that you get to become friends with some of these people, and after they read your research, and we're all trying to do the same, do the right thing, and But he's a great guy. There's a lot of good, as a Josh Cosman. Let's see. Now, the irony of the whole thing is that a lot of the stuff, guys, is it's so much of the research. I would say probably 80% of it, I got it from press releases and things in bankruptcy filings and things like that. So a lot of these times, these companies would they brag about what they're doing, and then that's how I found a lot of information. So it's really kind of weird. So they brag about how they do something like a dividend recapitalization. Now, do you know what a dividend recapitalization is, guys? Now, Anthony, you're a recovering CPA. I'm going to ask you.
I was going to defer that to Cameron to see if he...
I have no shame, Barry. I don't know what that is.
It sounds some sort of fancy little 3-card Monty is what it kind of sounds like, but I'm not familiar with the term.
Well, it is financial sorcery. I call it financial sorcery. So let me give you a great example. Okay, so I like actual examples. So you ever heard of like California Pizza Kitchen? You know the frozen pizzas you get?
Yeah.
They're actually pretty good.
Okay.
I like the chicken barbecue ones. They're very thin. They're good, very good. So this is an actual case. So back in 2012, and I'll have when the book comes out, I'll have it in detail for people. Okay. So like around 2012, when California Pizza Kitchen had like 487 restaurants, something like that. So two California private equity firms, Golden Gate Capital, and was one of them. And then there was Blum Capital, which is I believe it's Blum Capital. Yeah, Blum Capital, whose husband was Richard Blum, who was the husband of Dianne Feinstein, from U.S. Senator from California. Not making any of this stuff up, guys. They bought California Pizza Kitchen in a leveraged buyout. I don't know what it was, 1.2 billion or something like that. Not a big one, not like a Caesars, but huge. So they go in, they buy it. They bought the company in a leveraged buyout, so they're paying all this money, interest costs. And then 2-3 years in, they said, "Hey, let's remortgage this and take more money out of the company, so we get paid back. So we take all our money off the table." So this is what they did. So they actually remortgaged the entire balance sheet of California Pizza Kitchen. They pulled out $400 million out of the company. I'm not making this up, was remortgaging it. Now in private equity too, it's not the private equity companies who are paying these interest costs. It's the company themselves that they acquire. So there's nothing. And so because there was so much debt on the balance sheet, California Pizza Kitchen ends up going to bankruptcy. Now, the same thing happened with, remember Payless Shoes?
Mm-hmm.
It was the largest shoe retailer in the world. Same thing. They never recovered though. They went into liquidation. So, a lot of people don't understand. So this is what they're doing with other people's money. So I just think it's really, so what I think what you guys are doing, helping people, do things which are prudent and safe, that's why I'm really, in favor of what you guys are doing, because it's really, really important. As Will Rogers said 100 years ago, I'm not so concerned about the return on my money, but the return of my money. So this is like things like dividend recapitalizations are huge, and this has caused bankruptcies of companies like Intelsat, which is actually the largest satellite provider in the world. So I have all these actual case histories, so I don't get sued, but it's all and getting data from people like S&P and Moody's and stuff like that to back it up. So I wouldn't say any of this stuff unless I could back it up.
Yeah. Barry, I wanted to just personally thank you for all the research and stuff that you've done. I mean, the books that you've put out there have absolutely changed my life and gave me a better understanding of personal finance. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And I cannot wait for your next book to come out. Is there a date that this is going to be available?
Man, yeah, it'll be hopefully I'll be out by Christmas. I'm sick of looking at it, but it takes a lot of work, and no, it's I don't know. Ernest Hemingway once said about writing about books that success comes around the sixth or seventh draft, and unfortunately, it takes a lot of labor up and just to verify everything, and it's only something I can do. But hopefully I'll be shipping it off with a outside editor within 20, 30 days.
Awesome.
That's the plan. But yeah, and so that's the plan. So yeah, and it's going to help a lot of people. It's going to really help what you guys are doing. And more importantly, yeah, because as they say, America, we're a great country, but our retirement and savings plans are horrible.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes from Nelson Nash is, if you know what's happening, you'll know what to do. And after reading his book, but also reading yours, right, someone should have a very good understanding of what's happening, and then also an avenue to protect themselves. So again, thank you very much, Barry. We look forward to having you back. But man, if somebody's listening and wants to grab some of your content, follow you, books, they want to talk to you, where's a good place for them to go?
Go to barrymajamesdyke.com. There's also they can sign up. We'll put you on we have a newsletter which I'll be refiring up soon. Okay, and because luckily now, guys, I've sold my books now in 23 countries. And just through word of mouth. So it's just been so the next one should do pretty well. God willing.
Yeah. I can't wait. And thanks again, Barry. We will look forward to having you back. But again, have a great day.
You too. Thank you, guys.
Go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.
Take care.
Barry, if you want to stay on for a second,